By the early 19th century, Europe was shifting from philosophy to precision. Adam Smith had described the orchestra of commerce, but David Ricardo wanted to understand its sheet music. Born in 1772 to a London family of Portuguese Jewish descent, Ricardo began as a stockbroker on the London Exchange. There, surrounded by the chaos of bonds, currencies, and speculation, he trained his mind to see patterns behind human behavior. Numbers that pulsed beneath emotion. While Smith worked from moral theory, Ricardo worked from equilibrium. His masterpiece, Principles of Political Economy and Taxation, 1817, sought to reduce the market to quantifiable law. He formalized concepts Smith hinted at. Labor value, rent, capital, and trade, not as moral tales, but as equations of interaction. Ricardo saw the economy as a set of constraints and incentives, an early systems model. Prices were not moral signals, but mathematical consequences of scarcity and productivity. In doing so, he helped economics evolve from moral philosophy into an analytical science. Ricardo's starting point was deceptively simple. What determines value? He agreed with Smith that labor is the true source of value, that goods derive worth from the human effort required to produce them. Yet Ricardo added precision. He distinguished between use value, what satisfies needs, and exchange value, what something trades for, showing that market prices fluctuate around a deeper gravitational center, labor time. This was the beginning of value theory, the attempt to map production into numerical relation. Ricardo recognized, however, that not all labor is equal. Skilled work, machinery, and capital complicate the equation. Thus began the earliest struggle with what would later become marginal analysis. How to reconcile abstract labor value with market price dynamics. Though Marx would later radicalize Ricardo's ideas, Ricardo himself sought only one thing: stability. If value could be measured through labor, then economic order could be predicted through time, like physics applied to production. Ricardo's most revolutionary insight came not from factories, but from ships. In his theory of comparative advantage, he demonstrated that nations benefit from trade even if one is more efficient at producing everything. What matters is relative efficiency, the opportunity cost of producing one good over another. If England excels in cloth and Portugal in wine, both gain by specializing and exchanging. This was a mathematical triumph of logic over nationalism. Comparative advantage explained why free trade could raise global welfare, a foundational idea that still shapes the World Trade Organization and modern globalization. Ricardo's equation stripped politics away from trade. It wasn't about dominance, but optimization. Yet beneath the abstraction lay deep moral questions. Could nations dependent on trade preserve autonomy? Could efficiency coexist with justice? Ricardo believed it could, but the centuries after him would test that belief with tariffs, wars, and global imbalances he never foresaw. Ricardo's theory of rent tackled a different problem: the rising cost of land in an industrializing world. He observed that as population grows, demand for food increases, forcing cultivation of less fertile land. Rent, therefore, is not payment for labor, but for the fertility differential between superior and inferior soils. This idea revolutionized how economists viewed resource distribution, showing that rent is a surplus, not a cost of production. It also led Ricardo to his famous iron law of wages. That competition among workers drives wages toward subsistence unless productivity outpaces population. Here, Ricardo glimpsed the structural tension between capital and labor long before Marx, a system where growth naturally creates inequality unless countered by innovation or policy. His rent theory became one of the earliest models of diminishing returns, the precursor to modern resource economics and land value taxation. Every debate on housing, agriculture, or urban rent traces its roots back to Ricardo's pen. Ricardo died at age 51, but his equations outlived empires. He left behind a blueprint for economic reasoning, a discipline that could quantify human activity with the rigor of mathematics. His models shaped classical economics, influenced Marx's critique, and informed 20th century trade policy. Yet his legacy is not simplicity. It is structure. He built the first true economic model, abstract, idealized, predictive. Ricardo believed that clarity came from abstraction, that to see society's motion, one must remove the noise of emotion. That belief would dominate economics for 2 centuries, for better and worse. Today, every spreadsheet modeling GDP growth or trade imbalance owes something to Ricardo's quiet precision, the mind that saw beauty in balance sheets and order in exchange. Where Smith gave economics a soul, Ricardo gave it a skeleton.